spirit. It's the spirit of those who crossed oceans and carved that wilderness, seeking a better life. The frontier experience was all about individual liberty and empowerment. I think kind of a modern day illustration of that for me personally was the desire that my parents had to move up to Alaska. It was only a couple of months after the '64 earthquake, and that was at the time the world's largest, or at least second largest earthquake. It lasted 4 minutes, and it registered 9.2 back on the old style Richter scale that they had. And it was a sparsely populated, very remote, very expensive place to live. And they had just had this earthquake, and yet my parents didn't have a fear of what was up there, a fear of the unknown. Instead, a sense of adventure and freedom and opportunity. It surpassed a desire for ease and for comfort that perhaps they could find elsewhere. And I thank my parents for giving me that, and Todd's family too. It's an Alaska Native family, an Eskimo family that has been there for generations and generations, where, believe me, their lifestyles, their traditions show that they had to be survivalists. They had to be so independent and self-reliant and have such strong work ethic that I'm so thankful that I married into this family too, to kind of instill even more of that spirit of work ethic and that appreciation for what it is that we can do as empowered individuals. American pioneers and patriots, it was their determination represented the entrepreneurial free market ethic that made our country great, and it made it full of optimism. That is our foundation, is that optimism. So realizing what our foundation is, we have to kind of take a step back the last couple of years and say, well, what has happened? We know where it is that we came from. We know what our country is built upon. What has happened? It's so unfortunate today that so many Americans feel, instead of optimism, a sense of disempowerment and disenchantment and dissatisfaction. There was a recent Gallup poll that showed 81% of Americans are dissatisfied with the way that our country is being governed. I'm one of those 81%. I have a feeling most of you are too. 81%, this crosses all political boundaries, and this is what we call really broad-based general dissatisfaction. According to that same poll, the majority of Americans have, quote, little or no confidence in the people who seek or hold public office. They believe the federal government is wasteful and has grown, quote, so large and powerful that it poses an immediate threat to the rights and freedoms of ordinary citizens. These sentiments aren't just about Republicans or Democrats. Shoot, even far left-wing liberal wackos who, in all of their misguided thinking, they think that government should be doing even more and should be growing even more. Even they realize now that the government isn't doing anything very well. People are realizing that today's federal government just isn't inefficient and wasteful, but it is actually, our own government is actually a threat to individual freedom. It's not just in our way, it's actually working against our interests, friends. Today, the little guy is being left out in the cold by our permanent political class in Washington, D.C., which represents often both sides of the aisle. These are the same politicians who talk endlessly about cutting the budget, and yet they keep spending more. They talk endlessly about this massive, unsustainable debt, and yet they keep incurring more. They spend and they print and they borrow and they spend more, and then they dare send us and our kids and our grandkids the bill for what they are creating that is getting in our way, in the private sector's way. They send us the bill for what they are doing. They don't feel the same urgency that we do. Why should they? Business is good for them. They have padded themselves from the economic pain that the rest of America feels. And I said recently at a Tea Party event in Iowa, I said, ever notice how many of them, they get to Washington, D.C. of very modest means, and yet miraculously, throughout the years, they become very, very wealthy individuals. It's because they derive their power and their wealth from access to your money, to the taxpayer's dollar. What do they do with your money? They use it to bail out their Wall Street friends and their corporate cronies, and to reward campaign contributors, and to buy votes with their earmarks. And there is a name for this, and it's called crony capitalism. And this is what we must defend our republic against. See, this is the root that grows our economic problems. Our unsustainable $14 or $15 trillion debt, our outrageously high unemployment numbers, and the housing market that is in the tank, and a stagnant economy. These are all symptoms. And if you notice, the politicians are focused on the symptoms while the disease continues to go untreated. We will not solve our economic problems in this country until we confront the crony capitalism of our permanent political class.